pick up some YouTube cliches. Roll the intro. So I want to say there's like a black cherry flavour to the flavour palette.
I get milk, mainly.
Because you put dirty milk in your coffee, so it just tastes of milky coffee. I just taste of milk.
Just like milk in my coffee.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, I'm enjoying a good black coffee, so I'm getting all of the flavours in mine.
Fair enough.
So carbon neutral coffee, this one. Travelled here by sailboat.
By boat?
By boat. Genuinely, went on a sailboat, travelled here, not a single piece of carbon emitted into the atmosphere by getting here until it was in Britain, then DPD driver drove it here in a van.
The DPD bit doesn't sound good, the van aspect.
So really low carbon right up until we got involved in the supply chain there.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, question. We're going to assume that prices are equal now, and you've got the choice between 2 bags of coffee. One fair trade, one not. Which do you go for?
Fair trade.
Because you're a caring consumer.
Yes. I believe that everyone should get a fair wage because it is fair trade. It also probably makes me feel good that I can be hosting people at home and be like, oh, check out this fair trade coffee.
Ah, okay. So that's the idea of like building social capital. Someone else sees you drinking a fair trade or making fair trade coffee and they go, oh, she's a really good person. Yeah, so in economics we have a term for this. It's called the warm glow effect.
Warm glow effect.
Possibly one of the best named effects in economics. And I guess by its name, by calling it fair trade, we're making the implication there that other trade isn't fair, aren't we?
Yes, actually we are. You do think of people, I don't know, child labourers, for instance, as being unfair trade.
Yeah, and fair trade, it's got to be good for people, right?
Yes, but I don't think this is where we're going.
No, it's not. In fact, I'm going to hazard a guess that lots of people don't understand what it is about fair trade that actually makes it fair trade. So
Yes.
I think one of the first things I'm going to have to do is probably go and explain that.
Oh God, of course you are.
Right. So if we're going to look at how fair trade works, really we're going to need a graph. Because what we need to do is look at how prices change over time. So we're going to put price on our vertical axis and we're going to put time there on our horizontal axis. With this being a really good neat graph, we're going to draw it with a ruler. Now we're going to imagine that this is one of those really nice smoothed out graphs, one of the ones that's using aggregated averages, not a monthly one, not a year one. You'll notice that I haven't actually put any dates on that time axis. It's because this is representative. Don't think that this is a real graph that has actual real data on it. Now you see that the price is rising and falling, it's different amounts at different times, and there are reasons for this. So one of the big reasons for it to rise could be bad weather. There's a drought. Less coffee can be grown, and because there's less being grown and less being sold, people are going to pay more for it, so the price gets driven up by the lack of availability. We call this the scarcity principle. The more scarce something is, the more we're willing to pay for it. We might have other reasons why the price goes up, like bad weather. So if we have an El Nino cycle and it's leading to drought throughout that coffee belt, that region where coffee grows, then there's less coffee in circulation, scarcity principle kicks in, price goes up. We might have reasons why the price comes down, like trade liberalisation. Say a new country that hasn't previously been able to export its coffee particularly well signs a new trade agreement. It's now able to participate in global trade. We're seeing an increase in the total amount of coffee in circulation. Just like the scarcity principle drives the price up when there's not much coffee, it drives it down when there's a lot. We have other things that can affect the price that aren't just bad weather, like the speculation on commodities on the futures market. and based on confidence we can get responsive algorithms that change the price. So we'll go ahead and just rebrand that as stock exchange nonsense, things that can just influence how much we're going to pay. Now, this black line represents market value. It's how much we're paying for regular coffee. What we're going to do is in blue, we're going to add the price being paid for fair trade coffee. And as you can see, it starts off a little bit higher. In some cases, it matches. This is because fair trade has a guaranteed minimum. There's a minimum price below which it can't fall. It will always get paid, and it is always just a little bit higher than market value. What this gives us are distinct periods of times. There's times when it's not especially worth being a fair trade farmer, and we're going to highlight those in blue. It's a time where you'll make just as much being a regular farmer of coffee beans and selling them normally as you would do under a fair trade contract. However, there are times when it clearly looks to be much more worthwhile being a fair trade farmer, and we're going to highlight those areas in black where you are going to do much better than the market because the market's not doing especially well for coffee. Now, this assumes that it's really easy to move between being a fair trade farmer and when it's not. Unfortunately, that's not quite true. So, if you're going to be a fair trade farmer, someone's going to have to check that you're following all the fair trade rules, aren't they?
Well, yeah, otherwise you shouldn't be allowed to have the certificate, the stamp on your product.
Okay, so we're going to have a mechanism of paying to have that logo for fair trade on things.
Well, yeah.
And fair trade's designed to help out the lowest income and kind of we think of the poorest farmers, don't we, benefiting from it?
In theory, yes.
Do you feel I'm setting you up for something?
You are setting me up, I know.
So how much do you think it would cost to be allowed to have that logo, to license and have that logo on your product?
God, I don't know, a few £100 maybe?
Yeah, it's $600 US. And you need to have that up front before you're allowed to sell anything. So if we're thinking about it benefiting really low income farmers and guaranteeing a better wage for them, they need a $600 US upfront fee. And even then, once you've subscribed to it, that doesn't guarantee that someone's actually going to buy the coffee beans. Now, I know that we're going to talk about a single example and we shouldn't extrapolate from single examples and use that to generalize from a wider trend. However, there is a cooperative in India, and it did take them 9 years before they successfully found somebody who was going to buy their coffee beans under a fair trade contract.
So did they pay their $600 every year for 9 years?
So it's a $600 joining fee, and then there is a continued annual subscription fee, but it costs more to rejoin if you leave it. So if you think about where we have the blue shaded and the black shaded areas,
yes.
If you leave and come back,
yes.
You're having to put up that money to begin with.
Ouch.
Now, fair trade's been around for a long time. It's been around, we're entering the 4th decade of fair trade, which means we're actually able now to do some really good longitudinal studies of it.
Yes.
And if you look up the Hohenheim study, and you can go ahead and Google that, or we can put a link to it below. If you go and look at the Hohenheim study, they spent 10 years looking at coffee farming in Nicaragua. And they had a control group of non-fair trade farmers, and they had actual fair trade farmers, and they measured how people were doing. And because of the additional cost of subscribing and continuing to use the license, they found that farmers who just traded normally at the end of the 10 years were better off.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's not worked out super well for those people involved. And this is an issue for me because in kind of a positivistic measuring it sort of a way, fair trade isn't necessarily actually making things better. But we still present this dichotomy of things being traded fairly and things being traded unfairly, which is kind of unhelpful.
Yeah.
As a way of framing it.
There's no real grey area, isn't it? It's meant to be like black and white.
Now, obviously, we come up with this problem a lot, and we're going to refer to this problem a lot, where you think of everything that I'd want somebody to understand, and then you think of the amount of time we actually have to try and get them to understand it. So, I've been trying to think of a better way of approaching it other than framing it as unfair trade and fair trade, because we definitely used to do that. I remember Key Stage 3 Fair Trade Fortnight, we used to make posters and stick them up, and before we ever tried to actually learn real things.
And the fair trade chocolate stories, because you got all those free resources, didn't you?
You used to colour in how much of the chocolate bar went to different places, because the colouring in was what mattered.
But then you got chocolate at the end.
You did get chocolate at the end of it. So, in an effort to try and explain it, I've drawn a convenient diagram.
We love diagrams.
So, we've got it in its original format, kind of fair versus unfair, and you've got two containers, and you are either one or you're the other.
Okay.
Or we're suggesting now that maybe we should be thinking about it as a continuum.
Okay.
And in our continuum, we're going across, and I've got mass trade, fair trade, and direct trade.
Direct trade.
So yeah, in terms of coffee, direct trade is the exact right word.
Yeah.
So it makes up less than 3% of the total market, but it's people who are growing and producing really, really high quality beans, producing the very best coffee and being paid, well, the market rate for a really great coffee is much, much higher. However, it also recognises that most people don't drink really, really great coffee. Most people drink really quite poor quality coffee,
Starbucks,
which would be
Costa.
the mass trade over here.
Yeah.
And my thinking is that this doesn't just work for coffee, that it might work for more things. So if we think of stuff like washing machines, in order for washing machines to be available in most houses and therefore people to have more free time and kind of read more and the emancipation of women from
Yes.
the ability to join the workplace and
Female
stuff,
emancipation, yeah.
what we needed, among other things,
Just female emancipation.
among other factors that led to that, were, you know, the introduction of white goods into houses, which freed people up and reduced the number of labour hours that they were using.
But they had to be massively traded.
But they
otherwise.
had to be reduce the price point to the
Yes.
point where you could have them in every house.
Yeah, of course.
So you needed to produce lots of them. So if we think of like increasing quantity going this way,
Yeah.
and if we think of increasing quality going that way, then we have a way of explaining it. So if what people want is that warm glow effect of buying the best kind of coffee, then probably not going to be aiming for here. If they want to do something that's really going to benefit people and see lots of money go to farmers, what they should be doing is buying the best possible quality coffee that they're going to enjoy.
Okay.
And they'll also enjoy the best possible quality of coffee. Now, I did try presenting this to a class of year 8s, a class of very bright year 8s who really enjoyed it. And I was like, and I think this is a way of understanding it and making sense of it. And I got a question from a young girl. And try and picture her in your mind. So wearing glasses, she has kind of all of her coloured pencils out in front of her already. Super neat notebook. And her question was very simply, why then would anybody do anything except produce directly traded goods? And I guess her question really was, why would anyone do absolutely anything other than the very best that they can do at any given moment in time?